You won't believe what just happened inside that courtroom. It was one of those moments when the entire room froze. Rockmond Dunbar, the actor millions love from 911, sat there, head in his hands, whispering, "Oh my God," over and over again. The man who once earned $100,000 per episode was now crying in front of his wife and kids, apologizing to them for losing everything. It was the kind of fall no one saw coming. But let me tell you, this story didn't start in the courtroom. It began years ago when destiny took an unexpected turn in Rockmond's career in life. Back in 2021, Hollywood was under pressure. Studios, networks, everyone, they were rolling out vaccine mandates left and right. And when the hit show 911 followed the same path, no one imagined it would lead to this kind of chaos. Rockmond, who played Michael Grant, refused to get the COVID-19 vaccine. He said it wasn't because of fear or rebellion, but because of faith. He was a member of something called the Church of Universal Wisdom, and he believed the vaccine went against God's teachings. He asked for an exemption, both religious and medical, hoping the producers would understand his point of view. But here is the shocking part. Disney, which owns 20th Television, denied his request completely. They didn't even consider them twice. Soon after, Rockmond's character suddenly disappeared from the show. The scriptwriters wrote that Michael Grant had gone on a spiritual journey to Haiti, but fans knew something deeper was going on. The headlines came fast. Rockmond Dunbar leaves 911 over vaccine mandate. The internet buzzed with mixed reactions. Some praised him for standing by his beliefs. Others called it career suicide. This is where it gets interesting, because while the world was debating whether he did the right thing, Rockmond was quietly planning his next move. He didn't just walk away from his dream job. He decided to fight back. And not just against any company, against Disney, one of the most powerful corporations on the planet. He filed a lawsuit in 2022, claiming that Disney's decision was discriminatory. According to him, non-Black cast members were allowed to stay, even when they requested similar exemptions. He believed race and religion both played a role in why he was pushed out. But what makes this story different is how personal it became for him. Rockmond didn't just see this as a work dispute, he saw it as a test of faith. In his own words, he said, "This is a spiritual war. This is a war of evil against good." He believed that God wanted him to take this stand, even if it cost him everything. And that belief carried him straight into a courtroom where he would soon face the toughest fight of his life. As the trial began, everyone could see how much he had lost. He wasn't that confident TV star anymore. He was a man who looked tired, broken, and desperate for justice. But still, he stood firm on his beliefs. He told the court he wasn't anti-vaccine. He just believed that man-made substances like the COVID shot were harmful and went against his spiritual values. But here's the craziest part. Disney's lawyers weren't going to let this slide easily. They came armed with evidence that would shake his entire defense. You see, according to them, Rockmond wasn't exactly living by the same religious rules he was claiming in court. Their legal team presented proof that he regularly took 37 different medications, including synthetic testosterone and other substances that his own church labeled as sacrilegious. The courtroom went silent. The contradiction was hard to ignore. When the lawyer confronted him, Rockmond could only say, "I'm not perfect," but the attorney shot back, "This isn't even close to perfect." The tension in the room was so thick, you could almost feel it through the air. Dunbar's words about faith and principle now faced cold, hard evidence that weakened his claims. Still, he didn't back down. He looked at the jury and said he was standing on the side of God, no matter the outcome. For him, this was never about fame or money. It was about doing what he believed was right in the eyes of his faith. The courtroom battle only grew heavier as the days passed, and Rockmond Dunbar's emotions seemed to unravel more and more. Every time he took the stand, you could see the weight of it all pressing down on him. Years of fame, success, and confidence now replaced by fear, guilt, and uncertainty. He told the jury that he wasn't fighting for fame or money anymore. He was fighting for his soul. "Take my cars, my money, I don't care," he said in a trembling voice. "You have to leave here with your soul intact." Those words echoed through the courtroom, and for a moment, it almost felt like a sermon instead of a legal proceeding. But here's the shocking part. While Rockmond was speaking about faith and principles, Disney's lawyers were slowly dismantling his case piece by piece. They didn't attack his religion directly, but they questioned how consistent his beliefs really were. They called on a medical expert, Dr. Glenn Bronstein, who flat out rejected Rockmond's claims about the vaccine being dangerous or against God's creation. The doctor called his ideas ridiculous, even labeling them as hogwash. Those words hit hard. Rockmond's argument, which was emotional and faith-driven, couldn't compete with the strong scientific evidence Disney's side presented. This is where it gets interesting, because while the courtroom was focused on facts, Rockmond's side tried to focus on feelings. His attorney, Scott Street, argued that it didn't matter whether Rockmond's beliefs made sense to anyone else. What mattered was that he truly believed in them. "It's not up to your employer to question your belief," his lawyer said. That moment brought a brief sense of hope to Rockmond's supporters. Maybe, just maybe, his faith would be respected. But the craziest part was what came next. Disney's attorney, Maria Rodriguez, reminded the jury that Rockmond wasn't fired because of his religion. He was removed because he refused to follow workplace safety policies that applied to everyone. She painted the picture of a company trying to keep hundreds of employees safe during a global crisis, and one actor choosing to stand against it. Slowly, public sympathy started to shift. And while all this was happening, Rockmond was drowning, not just emotionally, but financially. He revealed that he had spent his entire retirement fighting this case. He admitted that he was underwater, unable to recover from the debt he'd fallen into since losing his job. He wasn't just losing a lawsuit, he was losing his livelihood, his reputation, and maybe even his faith in how the world worked. "It was a dream job," he told the court softly. "It was like winning the lottery." And then it was just gone. But here's where destiny took another unexpected turn. Despite all the evidence, despite the emotional testimonies, the courtroom didn't seem to lean his way. Every question from the jury, every look from the judge seemed to hint at what was coming. And when that moment finally arrived, the reading of the verdict, the silence in the room was unbearable. Rockmond sat there, eyes fixed on the jury, hands clenched tight. You could almost feel him praying under his breath. The judge looked down at the paper and, in a calm tone, announced that the jury had reached a unanimous decision. The result? They ruled in favor of Disney. That one sentence shattered everything. Rockmond's face went pale, his lips trembled, and his head fell into his hands. "Oh my God," he whispered again and again. "I'm so sorry." He turned to his wife and kids sitting behind him, tears running down his face. It was like watching a man lose not just a case, but a part of himself. He had believed that God would carry him through this fight, but now it looked like heaven had gone silent. He stayed seated even after the courtroom began to clear, his eyes empty, his career in ruins. The man who once stood on red carpets and smiled for cameras now sat in a federal courtroom whispering apologies. But here is the part no one saw coming. Outside the courthouse, as the reporters surrounded him, Rockmond lifted his head, wiped his tears, and said something no one expected. "God still won today." The reporters froze, not sure how to react. How could a man who just lost everything still believe he'd won something greater? That was the mystery people would argue about for days. And that's when the world outside began to react. And not everyone was kind. The world outside the courtroom didn't waste a single second reacting to Rockmond Dunbar's downfall. The moment the verdict hit social media, the internet turned into a storm. You won't believe the kind of things people were saying. It was brutal. Some users mocked him without mercy, calling him Rockmond Dunbar, saying he had just fumbled the biggest bag in Hollywood history. One person even commented, "If I was making $100,000 per episode, just inject me with that." Another wrote, "He should have kept quiet. Now he can't even feed his family." The online world had turned cruel, and Rockmond was the latest target. But here's the shocking part. Not everyone was against him. A small group of supporters stood by his side, calling him brave for choosing faith over fame. They believed that he didn't lose, he sacrificed. One user wrote, "He walked away with his soul intact. That's something money can't buy." It became a digital war, half mocking him, half admiring him. This is where it gets interesting, because the same people who once praised him as a talented actor now couldn't decide whether to call him foolish or fearless. Inside his home, things weren't any easier. Sources close to him said he was struggling deeply, not just financially, but mentally. His reputation had taken a hit, casting directors stopped calling, and offers dried up completely. Hollywood was silent, and silence is the loudest kind of rejection. For someone who once had a dream job and a growing career, it felt like he was living in a completely different world now. Every time he opened social media, he saw people laughing at his pain. Still, he kept his head down and kept praying. What makes this story different is how Rockmond reacted. Instead of disappearing from the spotlight, he started talking about faith even more openly. He called it his spiritual war, saying he wasn't fighting for himself anymore, but for others who were silenced for their beliefs. To some, it sounded noble. To others, it sounded like denial. But whatever people thought, Rockmond believed his faith was being tested, and he refused to fail that test. The craziest part is that during all this chaos, more details began to surface. Court documents showed that even after he was written off the show, he was still getting paid for a short while. The same $100,000 per episode. It was shocking for many fans who thought he had already been cut off completely. Some people started questioning, if he was still getting paid, why risk everything? That question lingered online for days, with fans debating whether his actions were truly faith-driven or fueled by pride. Meanwhile, the backlash from Hollywood circles was intense. A few insiders claimed he had been warned multiple times before being removed. They said he could have easily saved his role if he just agreed to regular testing or other safety measures. But Rockmond had made up his mind. He wasn't going to compromise his beliefs. He saw it as a test of loyalty to God, not to his employer. And that's where his downfall truly became tragic. As time passed, the story turned into something much bigger than one man's lawsuit. It became a symbol of how divided the world had become. Faith versus science, freedom versus rules, personal conviction versus corporate power. Everyone had an opinion, but no one knew the real pain Rockmond carried inside. Behind the cameras and court documents was a man who had lost his career, his comfort, and his peace, but still believed he hadn't lost his purpose. And destiny wasn't finished with him yet, because what happened after the trial changed the conversation completely. After the courtroom lights dimmed and the cameras turned away, Rockmond Dunbar's life entered a completely different chapter, one that no one in Hollywood could have predicted. He returned home with his wife and children, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. His career was gone, his savings were nearly wiped out, and the industry that once celebrated him had now turned its back. Yet, in the middle of all that loss, something about his spirit refused to break. He said, "This is my spiritual test, and I passed." Those words, simple but powerful, revealed the strange peace he found in defeat. But here is the shocking part. Even after everything, he didn't apologize for standing by his beliefs. While most people would have walked away quietly, trying to rebuild their image, Rockmond doubled down on his faith. In interviews and small gatherings, he said, "The verdict didn't matter because God still won." He insisted that no amount of money could replace the peace of doing what he believed was right. And this is where it gets interesting. While the public mocked him for throwing away a dream job, his followers began to see him as someone who stood against one of the world's most powerful companies without fear. Still, Destiny Guy took an unexpected turn once again. Behind that brave face, Rockmond was struggling more than ever. He admitted that the financial pressure was crushing him. The man who once lived comfortably was now facing uncertainty every day. Friends said he tried to stay positive for his children, but there were nights when he couldn't sleep, replaying the courtroom moments over and over in his head. He kept asking himself if he made the right decision. Was it truly faith, or was it pride disguised as conviction? That question haunted him more than the loss itself. Meanwhile, Hollywood moved on. 9-1-1 continued to air new seasons without him, introducing new storylines and new faces. For many fans, his absence was noticeable at first, but slowly forgotten with time. Yet, for Rockmond, forgetting wasn't an option. Every time someone mentioned the show, it reminded him of what he had sacrificed, not just a paycheck, but years of hard work and recognition. The show had been his dream come true, and it slipped away because he refused one thing: the vaccine. The craziest part is that even people who disagreed with him couldn't deny his courage. To take on Disney, lose, and still say, God still won, that takes a level of faith most people can't even imagine. Some fans began calling him a Hollywood martyr, while others labeled him a cautionary tale. But either way, his story had become bigger than just him. It became a reflection of a world where personal beliefs and professional demands often collide. And not everyone survives the impact. As time went on, Rockmond's story started resurfacing in podcasts, talk shows, and online debates. People questioned the fairness of how studios handled mandates and whether faith-based exemptions were ever truly respected. His name became part of a larger conversation about religion, power, and how one decision can destroy or define you. And that's what makes this story different, because no matter how much time passes, the lesson in his downfall still hits hard. Standing for what you believe in doesn't always bring victory, but it does reveal who you really are. In the end, Rockmond Dunbar didn't get his job back, and he didn't get justice in the courtroom. But maybe in his own way, he got something deeper: the strength to stand alone. He lost the battle, but believed he won the war of faith. And whether you see him as brave or foolish, one thing is certain: his story is a reminder that in Hollywood and in life, sometimes the price of conviction is everything you've ever earned. Now, only one question remains. Was it faith that guided him or pride that blinded him? You decide.